Welcome to Complete Edition, the podcast between a PlayStation Trophy Hunter and an Xbox Achievement Hunter. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Compulsive Nerd. I'm joined by AJ. You've been pretty busy this week, AJ. Have you done much gaming this week?
I haven't been gaming that much this week. I've been playing Darkest Dungeon still. This game is massive. I've played about 50 hours of it at this point, and I'm nearing the end of my first campaign, but I think I'll need to do 3 playthroughs of it. So I'm probably going to be playing this for a long time to come. I've already been playing it for a long time, but I've not had any time to really dabble with anything else. I'm still really enjoying it. It's brutal, it's oppressive, but it's rewarding and strategic, and it's on that line where it can be really frustrating. There was a set of characters I had that were really high level, so I'd spent hours building them up and going on adventures with them, and then they all just died. The whole party got wiped right at the end of a dungeon, and it was a long dungeon. And when the characters die, you lose them forever. You can't get them back. And then also any trinkets that they had on them that can be super rare, you lose all of them too. And then all the items you collected on the dungeon, all the loot that you got, you lose all of that as well. So it's you spend an hour and a half doing the mission, and then you lose characters that you spent 5 hours leveling up, and then also you lose all the trinkets that you have on those characters that might be the best ones you've ever seen for the whole game. So it's such a cruel game, but it leans into that and it knows it, but it also makes it so much more rewarding when you have to earn your victories, and when you get them you just feel so much better for it. It's sort of like that XCOM style game. So yeah, I've been playing that, not much else. I'm really enjoying it. What have you been playing recently?
Resident Evil, that's just the completionist way is I generally don't like to jump games. I don't know if you do that, but I've just been trying to get all the way through Resident Evil 8, and I did 4 playthroughs, and I played a little bit of my Vita, but I still haven't completed. I haven't got the platinum on Resident Evil 8. I have the Mercenaries mode, 3 levels on the Mercenaries mode left, and then I'm done. And I feel like it's very attainable, so I'm just probably gonna do that right after the podcast. I hope. You never know how things go.
The hardest thing is definitely the Mercenaries, and it's not. I'd say it's I don't know. I know PowerPix does this, but it's it's probably a 7 out of 10 difficulty, or a 6 out of 10 difficulty. It's not. It's not. I think some people have said it's very, very difficult, and I don't feel that way, just because you have such a window of to get the S rank is all you need, and you can get a double S or a triple S rank, so there's so much room for you to make mistakes.
Right.
That it's still pretty tight, but it's not, it's not inaccessible. It doesn't require perfection. So that's quite nice.
Yeah, that's what's so nice. And I've been using your guides with Maca, and they're so useful. I right before the show started, I was doing the Village 2 run, and I maxed out the pistol, and then at the very end I got the Magnum. And dude, first try using their guide.
Oh wow, thank you. I love to hear that.
So it's just I don't think that this is unattainable, and I love that this is part of the platinum, because if this mode, I wouldn't have touched this mode probably if the trophy wasn't involved with it. I'm so happy that the trophy it's not an SSS. You have to get SSS on every single one, because then that would be such a bitch. But I think that making it reasonable and also making it a little bit difficult is so smart when doing trophy guides or trophy lists.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that also makes it I quite enjoy the mode. I think the mode's pretty good. I wouldn't spend hundreds of hours on it, but it's good as a one and done thing.
Right.
And then also it's definitely, even though there's randomness with the the orbs that you get and the upgrades that you get, it's never impossible. You never get the worst RNG that make it completely unbeatable, and it feels consistent. I know when I was making the guides, there were a few times where when I was recording the guides, I wanted the run that I submitted to be a run that is above a regular S rank, or is repeatable and doesn't and minimizes mistakes for the most part, just so that if someone is trying to follow it, they can do a little bit worse and still get it. I hate those guides where you have to follow it exactly to the nanosecond, and if you don't, it will fail every time. That's the worst.
Right.
or like the person making the guide like got like amazing RNG, and if you get terrible RNG it won't work. So it took me a few tries to do that, but I felt that I could, and it made me feel like if I can get this, then the regular S ranks,
Yeah, because I
they're
was a little bit behind
easier.
on some of those. Like I was, and I was looking at the scores, and I like that Mako was like, "Oh yeah, you can get it's like around this score that you need." And after he said that, I was like, "Oh, all right, then I don't care about his score. Like I care about my score reaching that score. I just wish that the game had posted those scores, like 1.5 mil or." I think the one that I just did, Village 2, you had to get like 500,000, and I got 800,000, so I got SS, and I was like, hell yeah, let's fucking go. Like,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's some like weird difficulty balancing with it. I think it's the factory that like it's really hard to even have enough ammo to kill everything, and the
oh my
score is a
God.
little bit tight. But then there's other levels where it's like I think the final level, the Mad Village 2, you actually, I mean, if you're doing them in order, then you'll get to this. But the high score for like triple S, you can only do it's like 5 levels or something. You can only do the first three, and you'll already have the triple S score. So in
Whoa.
the guide, I do all five, and I actually get to the final boss, and then I just die on her. Like I just run into her and die because I'm already like hundreds of thousands of points clear of the S rank and the double S rank, that it like doesn't even matter. Like you shouldn't even have to get to that fifth stage. So it's weird because that makes it like easier than a lot of the earlier ones. So the difficulty's a bit weird, but it's definitely manageable on all of them.
That's exciting because I don't know how long I'm gonna be playing it today. I want to finish it and like move on, and that's actually something that I do as a gamer. I look ahead. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna finish this game hopefully this day, and then I'm like, oh, what am I gonna play? And I like looked. I downloaded Final Fantasy VII and the DLC, so I'm like, I could go after the Yuffie trophies. I could, and I'm probably gonna do that. And then I'm looking at Watch Dogs Legion because now the DLC is out and you can play as Aiden, and like I really love the Watch Dogs series, and I was not interested in the direction they went, but now that you have like a main character, I'm like, I might jump into it. Like that's seems like it's like a 40-hour platinum, not bad. I'm like, that's a fun thing I could do, but I'm kind of waiting for a sale. And then I also am interested in Biomutant. I want to do some more research on Biomutant because I remember when it launched like a month ago, that it was a little bit rough, and I know that there are patches now, so that's really nice. Some of the trophies were glitched out, so the platinum wasn't even attainable. Now it's attainable, and I'm seeing people posting it, and I'm like, all right, let's fucking go. Like let's do it. So those might be the next things that I'm going after, but I haven't decided yet.
I'm always terrible for that. Like I've got so many games on my backlog. When we talk about our history with Resident Evil, you'll even hear about that, and it's like I can't. There's no way this far away I can like commit to like the next 3 games I'm gonna play. I know a lot of people do that, but I can't do it. It's too difficult.
Right.
It's also because like I don't know when I'm going to like I don't know when I'm gonna finish Darkest Dungeon. So
Do you have any idea how many hours you have left?
maybe like 100 or so.
Oh,
In
Jesus.
terms of getting all the achievements. I've played for 50. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like, we might be in like, August by then, and then at that point, it's like, Hades is coming out, so maybe I'll just go straight into that on Game Pass.
Dude.
Yeah, or Death's Door is coming out soon. I'm interested in that. Or, I'll go back to Mass Effect 3 or something, but I really don't know. It depends on when I'm done with my current game and like what like the part of like what the zeitgeist is, or just like what takes my interest at the time.
Right. All right. Let's talk about Resident Evil 8. We're going to go into the spoilers, but we're not going to do it right off the bat. We're actually going to talk about our history with the series and the franchise, and then we're going to move into the story spoilers later. So if you want to stay and listen for that, you can. I'm going to go ahead and start out with my history, do a little brief history. So I started with Resident Evil 4. I was pretty young, so I never finished it. I just started, and I probably got to the part after the village at the very beginning, so I didn't get far at all. And that was about the extent of Resident Evil that I ever got into. And then I was watching E3 with the Easy Allies. Resident Evil 7 was being revealed, and I didn't know what it was, and I was very interested. I just thought the game looked really awesome. I'm like, I am so into this. I'm going to play this game. And then, later it was shown that it was Resident Evil 7. That was the reveal. It was huge. It was an awesome moment. And I was like, this is so awesome. I got to start like looking into this series. So I wasn't even a fan of the series at this point. And I started to get really obsessed with Resident Evil 7. And I was watching all the trailers, getting hype, which is, it can be dangerous to have expectations. But I even after all of the hype and everything, I still fell in love with Resident Evil 7. Like, it might be in my top 10 favorite games, like, ever. It's so good, and I played it several times. I think I played it over 6 times, and several times in VR, and I just continue to love that game and learn about the lore, and I just love how every lore drop in that game it's short. It's not too long. They're like a paragraph page, and then you go to the next page, and there's 2 to 4 pages every time. So it's not like you're reading a freaking book, but it's dropping just enough lore that it's interesting. Like, it's keeping me engaged in the story and things like what's going on. After I platinumed Resident Evil 7, I was like, all right, and I went back to play Resident Evil 4 like after Resident Evil 7, and I did not 100% it. That's not something I did, but I did beat it. And I was like, I'm good. I don't really want to 100% it. And I really did like it. I still think it's, I say all the time on the Discord, like, I think that Breath of the Wild is like overrated. That's a 97 on Metacritic. I'm like, Resident Evil 4 is a 9. It should be a 97. It should be a 98. This game is near perfect. I think, yes, it has tank controls, but I think it's designed so well with those tank controls to make everything feel intense and scary. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we're in a dark room for this to be scary. It has all the enemy types, and then the enemy types ramp up, and the story is whack, and it's just so much fun. Like, such a fun game. And I was like, all right, so let's go into Resident Evil 5. And I platinumed Resident Evil 5 with a friend of mine. And then I did not play 6. I kept hearing too many things about 6, and it was like, it's not good. Like, people just want it to be retconned and like not exist at all. And so I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to play 6 if other people say it's bad. So I've been thinking about playing 6. One of my friends wants me to run through it co-op with them, and I'll just play it on like a separate account so I don't have to 100% it if it's a bad game. But I started to dig deep into the franchise from here, and so I had played 7, 4, 5, and then I platinumed Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I had never played the original. I'd watched some gameplay of the original, but I never played it. And then I never played the Resident Evil 3 original, but I platinumed the remake, and I loved it. I talked about that on last week's episode. And that leads me to 8, which, again, another game in the franchise that I love. And I want to play Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2. They are on my backlog, and we were just talking about our backlog. But I haven't played them, and I probably will at some point, because they are on my backlog, and I tend to stick to my backlog pretty closely. But yeah, I'm a newcomer to the long-running series, and I love it. I think it's over the top and wild, and I just enjoy it. I enjoy the hell out of the series. What about you?
Yeah, all of the games have their own like unique tone and style that is very appealing to me as well. So yeah, I agree with what you were saying there. My first Resident Evil was Resident Evil 5. So I think actually I'd seen the Resident Evil film before I'd played any of the games. And the first film, it's pretty bad, but it's not terrible, and then the rest of the films are just like progressively worse. But yeah, so I think I'd seen that when I was like really young. And then I played Resident Evil 5. I played it in 2009. I played it pretty soon after it came out. It was still one of the first Xbox 360 games that I played, and I've got over 1,000 gamer score in it, but I don't have the full completion, and I enjoyed it. I know Resident Evil 5 is controversial, and it's sort of when the series was going down a dark path, but I was lucky enough to find someone in matchmaking who I became friends with and did the campaign with in co-op, and I think that definitely helps the experience.
It really does.
I think I get more problems with the game as time goes on, like looking back, but because it was my introduction to the series, I was probably easier on it, and I still think it's a fun adventure. I think there's so many different like settings and areas with each of the acts of the game that yeah, I really enjoyed it. Also, I think Wesker is perhaps the best antagonist of the series, and he's great in that game. And there's a I want to shout out as well. There's a DLC Lost in Nightmares where you're in the Spencer Mansion from the original Resident Evil, and that's one of my favorite DLCs ever. It's got like a slower pace and it's got more puzzles and traps and like a darker tone. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I never got the completion. I think professional difficulty is really annoying and bad, and the game isn't good enough for me to sort of want to go back and do it.
Right.
But I did replay the game on Xbox One as well, like the re-release of the game. So yeah, I enjoy it. I can't be bothered with the full completion on the hardest difficulty. I don't think it's fun or good enough as a base game to do it. But respect for you and for everyone who has it, because it's a hard difficulty professional. You die in one hit to pretty much anything. So
Yeah, but there's some things in there like a bulletproof vest, and there's a melee vest too, I believe.
yeah.
So there's things that make it a little easier if you're able to unlock them, which require maybe more playthroughs. But they definitely help that difficulty a lot.
Yeah, so after Resident Evil 5, I played Resident Evil 6 in 2012. The game sucks. It's terrible. I've never finished it. I hated it at the time. I hate it now. This is the only Resident Evil game where I've started it and then I've not finished it. So every other game that I've started, I've finished it. Not necessarily, got all the achievements, but at least finished the main story. It's Resident Evil 6, it's like 25, 30 hours long. It's like 4 campaigns in one, but they like rerun boss fights and stuff between them. Like you have to redo missions basically with different characters. It's really stupid. It was fun to co-op with a friend to make fun of the game and like talk about how bad it and cartoony it is, but that's more at the expense of the game rather than like it being it's not really like to the game's credit for the most part. So yeah, I don't recommend it. It's the worst I've played of the series.
And that's what I've heard, and that's exactly why I've never touched that one.
Yeah, then after that I played Resident Evil 4 on the 360. It's my favorite Resident Evil of all time and one of my favorite games ever. I think it's almost perfect, as you said earlier. I played it for the first time in 2014 as well. And so I know with a lot of games like this, people seem to say like, oh, well, if you played it when it came out, like you have loads of nostalgia for it, and like that means that, you'll like rate it more favorably compared to modern games. But for me, that whole argument just doesn't work or doesn't apply to me at all, because I played the game when the game was already pretty old, and I think games can age in some ways, but I think great game design is timeless, and great level design is just something that stands up forever. It's like great stories, right? If you've got a great story, it'll always be a great story, and that's how it is pretty much. I feel that way about Half-Life and other games, and I don't, maybe for me as well, it's because I don't care about graphics or appearances that much. It's not something I value that much.
Yeah, same here.
But I have the completion for Resident Evil 4. I have it on Xbox 360, then I did it again on the Xbox One re-release, and if they re-release it a third time, I'll do it again. They could re-release it 5 times and I'd do it. I can't get enough of the game. It's just, it's brilliant. And
was that hard?
I love it. The completion, you just have to play on professional. It's not that bad, I don't think. It's tricky in a couple of areas. It's funny because, so on Resident Evil 4 professional, the QTEs, the QuickTime events, get harder. And there's one quick time event towards the start where you run away from a boulder, and it's really hard on professional. Like you have to mash A way faster than you'd think. I failed it a few times, and I think that's possibly the hardest part of the game for me, which is really weird because it's not like the actual gameplay.
Are there weapons you can unlock and things like that?
I don't think so. I think you can get an outfit for Ashley that is a suit of armor that makes it so she can't be picked up and carried away.
Oh.
And I think that's about it for professional. I think you can get like a Chicago typewriter, which is a Tommy gun and some stuff like that, but I don't know. I don't think I ever used it, and I don't know if you're allowed to use it on professional. Or I think it might be that you only unlock it after you beat the game on professional. So there's some weirdness there. Like there is stuff you can unlock, but for the most part, other than I think the armor, I don't think you can. I might be wrong. It's been a long time, but I don't think you can use like you can't go in with like an infinite ammo rocket launcher on your first professional playthrough. I know that for sure. So then afterwards I played Resident Evil 7. I love that game. I think it's got great characters. It's got a fun completion. It's got a lot of unsettling aspects. I really like how each Baker family member has their own zone, and each zone is like a different take on horror. So Jack Baker is like a slasher inspired area, and then Marguerite is like insects and body horror stuff, and then Lucas is like Saw inspired. It's great, and I think the game is let down by its final third. Everything after the final fight with Jack Baker kind of sucks. I didn't like the boat and the tape and the PP Bison and all that stuff. It takes too long. It's boring. It's repetitive. There's no new enemies really added. So the variety gets tiring, and then the salt mine or whatever it is pretty bad, and the final boss sucks as well. You know, the final boss is just like a set piece
Right.
boss where you just shoot it in the head and then that's it. Then I played RE2 Remake. I also love this game. The police station and Mr. X are like iconic. They're amazing. It's like one of the best levels in any game ever, if you can call it that. The rest of the game, past the gun shop, isn't amazing, but it's not terrible either. It's better than Resident Evil 7's second half, in my opinion. It's a classic, and it's modernized and in the remake, and it's done so well, and it's a great completion. After that, I played a game that you didn't mention. I went back and played Resident Evil 1 Remake. So, you know, I say Resident Evil 1 Remake. Obviously, this remake came out years and years ago for like the GameCube, I think, originally. And then, you know, and it's now on current gen consoles. So, you know, it's not a new remake like RE2 and RE3. And the control scheme takes some adapting to, and the fixed camera angles are annoying. When I first started playing RE1 Remake, it's like I moved around like an idiot, like you just run into zombies and just like it takes you a while to get to grips with it. And the game is quite difficult and unforgiving as well in terms of like items, and you can like almost get yourself trapped and in like a really bad situation. I appreciate it as a classic. I think it's probably in the middle of like my favorites. I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10 or something. There's a lot of playthroughs required for the completion, and that drags it down a bit for me. I think the boss fights are mostly great. I think in terms of areas, it might be the best Resident Evil because all the areas are pretty good, and that's important for that game because you have to do a ton of backtracking through the mansion and through different areas, and it's one of those games where it gets more difficult when you like the world changes as you have to backtrack through it with different enemies and more enemies. So you never feel safe. RE2 Remake definitely does that as well. But yeah, it's a great game. Then I moved on to RE3 Remake. We talked about it before. We both like it. You like it a little more than I do, but I enjoyed my time with it. I think it gets too much hate for some reason. People seem to really not like it for it being short.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'd rather the game be 4 hours long and all the greatest moments packed into those 4 hours than it to be 8 hours with like 4 filler mediocre hours. You know, I don't like when games waste my time. I want it to all be good content. So I don't know. You know, maybe it's maybe arguing with the straw man, I guess. But I'm totally fine with it being a short game. And then RE8 is my next one. So you know, obviously, I own Resident Evil 0, I own Code Veronica, and I own Revelations 1 and 2, and I want to play them all, and I haven't yet, and I've owned them for years, and I will maybe eventually play them, but I've heard bad things about Resident Evil 0, I've heard good things about Revelations 1, so maybe I'll prioritize that.
I've heard good things about Revelations 2 also.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it in terms of co-op, I think. But yeah, they're all games I need to check out for sure. But that's it. That's my history. So I think I've played like maybe one more than you have.
Right, the remake
of the
it
series.
Sounds like the Resident Evil 1 remake.
Yeah, but we're pretty much even on the amount that we've played. I own Operation Raccoon City as well, but I'm never going to play it, to be honest. Like,
dude, it's
not going to happen.
Capcom really, I feel like, was brilliant with this series. Like, it's been going on for 20 years or something, and it's pretty phenomenal that you can jump into a lot of places in the series and you'll be fine. Like, I don't generally play games out of chronological order. Like, I'll play them 1 to whatever the most current is. But with this one, you know, you can jump in on 7, really enjoy it, and be like, what is going on in this world? And then you can go back to 2 or 4, because those are 2 different times. And it doesn't really affect like your interpretation of the story, because everything is there's so many different characters going on, like especially in like someone could start out at 5, you know, like you did. You could just start at Resident Evil 5 and it's a different kind of game. It's not going to be the like exactly the horror genre that the other ones are, but it's still its own kind of action game, and it's fun to play. And I found that so incredible that they were able to do this. And then not only that, but it's like, oh, we had a whole bunch of success with Resident Evil 7, we'll remake 2 and then remake 3, and 4 is just perfect how it is. I really hope they don't touch it. Like, I'm okay if they do like a VR game of it, but I don't know if we need a remake of 4. And
I think the remake will be worse than the original.
It can't be better. I don't think it can.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could do some things to maybe get around the problem, but I don't. You know, like they could be so true to the original that they barely mess with it in terms of the structure of the game and the levels. But yeah, I think they'll add to it, and I think it will be good. But I don't think it maybe even great. But I don't think it will be like almost perfect.
If they do a remake of 4, they better get a Leon in there. You know what I mean? Oh my God, Ashley and her Leon.
Yeah, they have to. Yeah, they have to do like the we jacked their line and all that stuff as well.
Exactly.
Like, all of the like. There's the part where in the village originally where all the zombies leave and Leon just says like, "Where did everyone go? Bingo."
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah, they have to keep all of that stuff. They can't get rid of it. It adds so much charm to the game.
Exactly. All right, let's go ahead and go into plot spoilers and story thoughts. We'll start out just with the Winters in their home. It gets very quickly into the action. Did you like the intro? Did you think that Mia was dead at the very beginning?
Yeah, I think the game does quite well. I mean, it's tough because I think maybe the story isn't as neat and clever as I wish it was or it thinks it is, but I think the sort of bait and switch of like, I think they were definitely foreshadowing like something's going to go wrong here, like it's like too perfect between Ethan and Mia, and like, one of them's going to get kidnapped or killed or whatever, and so they use it as like a double twist, right? Like as like a double fake out ultimately, because she's not dead, right? Spoilers obviously.
Right.
So it's they do a good job of that, because you think you're like predicting what's going to happen, and then you haven't predicted what's happened.
Right. With the very beginning, like in the trailers, they spoiled that. They spoiled that like Mia was dead. It was the very first reveal trailer, and I'm like, well, that was stupid. Why the fuck would they show me that? And then it turns out it's like, well, they were playing mind games, I guess. I don't really know what their strategy was. I didn't love that part.
No, it's bad as well, because it told you that must happen at the beginning of the game,
right?
Like when that happens in the marketing, right? And it does also suggest that like it's a fake out to some extent, because why would they put it in the marketing otherwise? But
right.
It suggests everything is not as it seems, and it's pretty weak. I wish they didn't have that in any of the trailers either, because it would have been really cool to play the game and to have such like a bombastic moment for the opening that wasn't spoiled. So.
Exactly. I don't know whose decision that was. It was a bad decision. But for me, like, when it's so quick, like I'm complaining, but it's so quick that it doesn't even matter. Like, the intro is you go upstairs, you go down the stairs, you're in the village. Like, instantly. It doesn't hesitate on that. It doesn't pause and let you go, oh, what happened to Mia? It's just like, we're in the village now. And that's the next part. We're going into the village. Did you play the demos?
No, but I watched them.
I played the first demo. I played the village demo.
Yeah, I watched the demos, and but I don't think I played them. I thought their demo rollout was so weird, where it like came out on PlayStation first, and then was like super time limited as well. Like you have to show up at this time to play it, and then also it was so close to when the game was coming out that it's like, why do I care? I should just wait for no effect. It's like, it's such a headache of like, oh, it's this day on PlayStation, it's this day on PC, it's this day on Xbox, and you have this time window, and it's two separate demos, and then on Xbox it's both the demos combined into one demo, but on PlayStation it's two separate demos. It's like, why have you done this? So yeah, I didn't play the demos. I didn't care about the demos. I skimmed through a video of it. It was like, oh, okay, cool. And yeah, I don't think the demos really added much. I really like It's the Resident Evil 7 demo where you were in the guest house of the Baker house, and in that demo there was like a series of like subtle puzzles that it took the community ages to figure out. There was like a whole Reddit like hunt for it and stuff, and like live streams trying to solve all the mysteries, and it was amazing. It was like, it was clearly inspired by PT, you know, pretty shamelessly, but I thought that was really cool still. And if you solved like the main puzzle of that demo, you got a coin, like a one of those coins that lets you unlock items in the trailer in like the middle of
That's right.
the sort of hub. Yeah, you got one of those coins when you got the actual game as like a reward for you solving it. I thought that was really cool. And then the Resident Evil 8 demos are just sort of, you just sort of walk around a section of the game and, you know, that's it.
I disagree with you a little bit on the demos. I agree on the part where they rolled out terrible. I wish they all would have just been live across all platforms same day, but they would have been timed and like not had the error, because there was like, the demo was live for a couple minutes in some territories and then it ended. And it's like they fucked that up. But I think it's really cool to have a time on these demos so that it's like, it's an event. It's like everyone's going to play the Resident Evil demo at this time and then it's over. It's over. Like you can't do anything else. But then they fucked it up because they're like, oh, here's more demos. Here's more stuff. It's like if you just would have gave us just the village by itself, and they did the, on PS5, they did the visual showcase demo, which, by the way, there's a reference in the game to that demo, and it's brilliant. As you play as this maiden, and she's like sneaking around the castle, and you find this necklace, and you're like carrying it around, and then eventually at the end of the demo, she dies, and when you enter Castle Dimitrescu, there's a scream that happens, and people are like guessing that that is the character that you played in the visual demo, and then later on you can find her in the dungeon when you kill one of the maidens walking around. You can find, like, you can pick up the necklace as a treasure, and it's like, it's just a reference to that. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's how demos should be. They should be this tiny little thing that are referenced in the game, a little bit tied to the story. Not really, it's just something cool if you played it or not, but it doesn't spoil anything, doesn't do anything for you. It's just visual, and like, make it a moment, make it a thing, but don't fuck it up, and don't do what they did where they exclusively on this platform for a long time and exclusively on this platform for a little time, and it's like, just do it all at once across everything. Yeah. I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah, that visual demo is definitely cool. I agree with you there. I think the timed stuff, I get what you mean about it being an event, but I think it doesn't work for that kind of demo for me, because the other two demos, the castle one and the village one, those demos, they railroad you down a certain path, you know, like you don't have like an open area to really explore that much, and half the demo is basically like a cutscene, and then that's it, and then you're just done. And so it's like yeah, it's timed, but you can just look it up on YouTube and you've got like you've basically got that experience. Like, I think if it was like a race against time, like escape room type thing, and it was like the community were like working on it, but it's like you've got like 2 days for them to solve it, and you get like an extra thing if you do, but if you don't, then it's just like gone forever. That would have been really cool. Or like in multiplayer games where they have like a beta and everyone shows up for that. I think those two work better when it's timed than the demos that they had. Like if they'd have structured the demo to sort of exploit that, it would have been more effective than with what they did.
Yeah, and I liked that the village demo, just the village. I didn't play the castle demo. I thought that was too far. You pushed too far. And I liked how I got like familiar with the hub before the game came out. I thought that was cool. And like you said, the escape room kind of idea, if you're not on the internet and you're not watching the playthroughs and you're doing it on your own and you have that 30-second timer, you feel stressed out. You feel like you're trying to solve this thing and you have a timer. It does feel very escape room like. And on my first time, because I think I played it twice to get out, but I didn't play the castle part. I ran out of time and I didn't get out. So I was like, I failed the escape room, you know? And yeah, you can go to YouTube and you can fire up another demo and do it, but it's like, my story is I didn't escape. That's it. And I think that's a cool event. But again, they fucked it up so badly. But let's continue on the village intro.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if we could talk about just how we feel about the village and the hub.
Yes, I love the hub, dude. I loved it, and I love how like maybe like partway into the village you meet the Duke, which, by the way, my favorite character, the most unique character, the most strange and mysterious character. There's no lore on him. Like, all the collectibles, there's nothing. Not that I read. And I was like, this guy is so mysterious. I don't know what the hell is about him, but you meet him and he gives you the map and he puts all the treasures everywhere, and it makes you want to backtrack throughout the entire map as you're playing, and it's like getting you familiar with that hub area. I freaking love that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, the Duke is very he's very like video gamey as well, in the sense of that like it doesn't really make sense how he like shows up in like Heisenberg's factory and all these places. Like they reference it in the castle where like there's a collectible that references him like showing up as like a trader or something. So like they try a little there, but it doesn't really make sense that he's like in all these places at once and following you around and all this. Like, but they don't care, you know. It's like they, in a good way, like he's just such like a larger than life character and just such like a video game thing, you know. It makes sense in the context of the gameplay, and he's, you know, he's got such good lines and he's acted so well, and he looks amazing. It doesn't matter that his character sort of doesn't really fit or make sense in the world. It's great, yeah. But as you were saying about the village, the game looks so like beautiful in terms of its art style and also graphically. I think it's a huge step up from Resident Evil 7. When you got up close to objects in Resident Evil 7, they looked pretty bad. They looked pretty blurry. But the detail is great. I mean, it helps playing on next-gen systems, obviously. And then the art design is amazing, and some areas look like paintings. I mean, even the actual paintings look like, you know, the paintings in the game look like real paintings. Like it just looks so good. And I first noticed that in the village, because you get like this wider sort of freedom in that area. And I really like the backtracking in the village through the game as well. You know, this sort of labyrinthian structure that it has and how it opens up more and more. I think it's one of the best hubs in any game I've ever played. I think games like Deus Ex do it better. They have like way better hubs, but it's like those and Resident Evil 8, and then like everything else is just worse. Like that, I was so surprised that the hub was so good, because it's not, the stuff like the police station definitely has backtracking and shortcuts, but not to the level that Resident Evil 8 has. It feels like a new thing for the series, at least to me. You know, and I understand the mansion as well, right, in Resident Evil 1, but so there's definitely, like, they've definitely built upon that, but yeah, that village, it's like, it's perhaps the best hub they've ever done.
I totally agree with you. And the lichens that are like running around and how you can clear them, and then it's like clear in that area, at least for a while. I really like that. And if you like return to the Benevento area, like after you finished it, and you like put the gravestone down, it spawns that crazy ass boss. I'm like, this is awesome. This like makes exploring just feels so good. And, you know, like I mentioned right off the bat, is these lichen designs are so good. There was like the tons of the lichen enemies, and then there was like the lichen wolf, and then there was like these giant undead creatures, and the giant hammer wielding guy, which, by the way, I think he was the husband of Louisa at the very beginning, because they were talking about the village leader, and that's who he ended up being. I read that in the concept art, and there was a lot of cool stuff that I read in the concept art.
Oh yeah, there's so many like great concept art and figures and stuff, and the games have always been like so good for that stuff. Like so good for all that extra stuff. And then yeah, like the backtracking, not even in the village, I hadn't considered it, but yeah, you can go back to other areas to get those treasures that you mentioned that the Duke puts on your map. And there's like little puzzles in terms of all of that and all those treasures, and areas where most players won't even go to them. There's somewhere you can take that like boat to them.
Yes.
And there's just like puzzle rooms with like that like fire chandelier thing that you like swing around and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's what they've done is amazing, and the enemy designs for the lichens. The enemy designs in Resident Evil 7 are pretty bad, I think.
Terrible.
Especially the main molded, and even like that like dog molded type thing, it like jumps at you and like insta hits you, and
yeah,
like none of them really felt, you know, they felt okay, they were fine, but you were mainly playing to get to like the big boss fights for the Baker family. They were like the big set piece battles that were like the exciting stretches of combat. But yeah, they stepped it up big time in Resident Evil 8.
Big
So
time.
so yeah, it was great.
And then we'll move on. Like we go from the village right into Lady Dimitrescu castle and the daughters. I loved the castle. I think that the elaborate secret passages and all the crazy shit that goes on inside of the castle is so fun, and like finding little collectibles and files inside the castle that are giving you context to like where you are, what happened here, like what's all different parts of the castle. I loved finding that stuff, and then like backtracking and getting all the puzzle pieces, getting different keys for the doors. I'm like, this is so epic. And like something that is totally skipped over, which I freaking loved this, was like the piano puzzle. I thought that was really fun and weird, and I was like, it's just a small little moment that I'm like, Ethan's just sitting here playing a
So
piano right now, like what the hell's going on? It's so
it's a
great.
banger that he plays as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So for me, the castle, I like the castle a lot. I don't think I love it as much as most people. Like your opinion is the one that I think is like the most popular opinion. I guess I have, and it is being nitpicky, I think, but for the most part, I think the only couple of problems I have with the castle, first of all, I think it's smaller and more linear than you think when you like first play through it. And this is always a problem with replaying games sometimes, is that like it's way like it's more like you're more railroaded through that area than you think you are.
Right.
And I think they could have maybe made it like a little more open in terms of giving you more options. You know, it's like we said about the village and like the backtracking, and then the police station and the mansion in other games. It like this castle wasn't quite, you know, it wasn't like the police station in Resident Evil 2. It was more restrained and tighter than that. And that's fine. It's not, you know, it's not terrible, it's not even bad. But, you know, I kind of wish they did a bit more with it. And then the other problem I have with it is that I think it's a bit too easy. I think Dimitrescu isn't particularly threatening. I think like the hallways are so wide, you can get past her quite easily. You don't have to like kite her around objects really. You can just run straight past her.
Yep.
Whereas I felt in Resident Evil 2 remake, for example, Mr. X takes up like all the space in most of the hallways, and you can run past him, but if you run past him, you're gonna get hit. Like you'll get hit once and then you'll get past him, or you have to run him to like specific areas to get past him, or you have to shoot him in the head to stun him or whatever. Whereas in this castle, you can pretty much run past.
Yeah, you can't do anything to her.
Yeah, you can't stop her, but you can run past her a lot more easily. I think I really liked how, but I agree with most of what you said anyway. So I do still like the area. I think I really like that on a harder difficulty, in that section where your hand is cut off
Yeah.
and you can't heal yourself, they add like extra zombies in your path as
Oh
well
yeah.
that weren't there before, and I thought that was really cool. I really liked that, and it actually makes that section pretty difficult. I forgot to mention, but what I wanted to say about the village is, and this, you know, I said the castle I think is a bit too easy, so I really like that added difficulty there. But I think it's probably not a problem with the castle, but that opening fight in the game where you have to like hold out, you know, before like sort of like the Resident Evil 4 fight, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, where you have to
Yeah.
like move the bookshelf and shoot the barrel and all that stuff. I think that fight is one of the hardest fights in the game, and it's right at the start, and everything in the castle is easier than that because
True.
I started the game on the hardest difficulty, and that's
Oh.
what I found gave me problems. It was like I played that and I was like, holy shit, this game's hard, this game's like really hard, and then like I beat it, and then it's like, oh, actually it's that was just like it, like pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah, for the most part. So yeah, I think that I don't think that's like the fault of the castle, but it was a bit. I guess they set me up in a way that they didn't pay it off as much as I'd want. I think the area is still great and it looks amazing too, and the puzzles aren't too difficult. The puzzle with the where you shoot the bells is really inventive. So yeah, great area.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and it is a very easy section. I didn't have any trouble with Lady Dimitrescu at all, but I just think that the enemy design, I think they call them Moriokas, which is like the maidens with the sword, like the drained maidens with the sword. I freaking love the design of that character. Probably my favorite character design in the game. I know it's simple, but they're just carrying around swords and they're like drained out and like mindless, and it's fucking awesome. They're not even hard to kill. They're not anything like that. They're not threatening. But I just love how you're finding the files and it's telling you like that's who they are. They're like it's all the maidens that have been turned into slaves, and that like Dimitrescu just punishes all of them and turns them into slaves like that. It's like in the concept art, like I was saying, all of the enemies in the castle are female because Lady Dimitrescu drains males of their blood and uses that to make her wine. And so, like, my favorite section probably is when you drop down into the basement and there's just that fucking blood, like flood, and you're like going around and they're just popping out of it, and I'm like, holy shit, like you're scaring me, and I was having a blast at that part. And Ethan comes down here, he's like, gross, he's just like totally disturbed by what he's about to do. And that's what I love about the castle, is like just this atmosphere. It's not even like the gameplay's the best part. It's just the fact that like they didn't know what they had when they were making it, and it's apparent that they didn't know what they had until like the internet took hold of Lady D and like all of that, and it was too late to adjust. And there's only 2 enemy types, so it's a lot like Resident Evil 7. There's the Morioka, and then there's the Samka, which is like the flying creature, which I thought was super fun. Very gothic, very gross when you look at their character model. These different areas are so unique in their boss fights and kind of everything that's going on, and I love that. I don't know, it's just it's not even a long section. It's a little tedious replaying it over and over again. Like you said, you can tell it's on rails more as you speedrun it, but it didn't bother me because it's just that first experience was so good with that castle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's maybe like a slight difference. I think it's not that, like, replaying it is tedious, it's that replaying it, like, it loses some of the magic almost of, like, the first experience, because you realize how much more linear it actually was than you might have been sort of, like, tricked into thinking, if that makes sense, like,
Yeah,
the first time you played it. But I actually like I like replaying the section. I mean, we're about to talk about it, but I think arguably the next 2 sections are much, much worse to replay because they're so scripted and they're so I don't know, they really get worse on
Let's jump into
replays.
that. Like, we're gonna go to Donna Benevento and Angie in the dollhouse and slash the doctor's house, which, by the way, I love that fact. I read in the concept art, like, that house on the dollhouse by the waterfall was originally designed to be a doctor's house, and like when you go inside, it's gonna be like a corpse. It was gonna be a corpse of Mia, like a similar looking Mia, and like then they changed it so that it was the doll that looked like Mia, and it was the doll house and all of that stuff. So it was quickly thrown out that it was the doctor's house, but it was gonna be like Donna's story was gonna be much more sad because she has like a mental illness, as some of the documents talked about, but it was going to be more like her family like committed suicide off the waterfall, and that like it was supposed to be way darker. And I was like, I don't know, I really loved that like Donna had this. She sits in the back.
I think I'm just an asshole because when you said like killing themselves off the waterfall, I just find that a really funny image of like like when people go in like a barrel over like a waterfall.
Oh right,
just,
right.
Like, it's so like I don't know. It's almost like Wile E. Coyote like nonsense, or because it's such like an overly dramatic way.
Exactly, which is why I'm glad they cut it. But it so would be Resident Evil. Like that would be so Resident Evil if that was like the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know that. I think the area it's a great area the first time, for sure.
Yeah, the thing is like it's really cool that I liked this area because specifically probably one of my favorite areas in the game, because this whole area is a different gameplay. It's a totally different gameplay style. It's not the same. You're not shooting enemies. You're not doing all this stuff. You're unarmed for the most part. And Donna is this quiet, weird character that's obsessed with dolls. And I really like her contrast of her character design, where she's wearing all black, like a funeral attire, and then the doll is wearing like a wedding dress, and that like represents like life and death. And you go into the basement, and yeah, you're right, it's on rails, everything. I'm still extremely uncomfortable. I don't think I died to the baby, but that baby,
I never did either.
That baby scared the fuck out of me, and every time I went down there I felt so uncomfortable, even though it's not that hard to outmaneuver it. It's not that, like where all of the on your subsequential.
I have a question about, because you just said you didn't die to the baby. I have a question about this section because you can get through this section, and I've seen people do it because I like seeing people's reaction to the section because because of how scary it is and how you're unarmed. But you can get through this section without hiding in any of the lockers that are placed around, and to me, there's too many placed around as well. Like it kind of weakens the section as well. It totally. I played Resident Evil 8 blind. Like I hadn't heard ahead by the time I got to sections or anything, so I didn't know what to expect from pretty much anything except from what was in trailers. But as soon as I saw those like lockers that you can open and walk inside and then shut, I was like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna get chased by a scary monster.
Same here.
Like,
Same here.
which kind of sucks in a way because you don't actually need the lockers in that section to get through it. I used them my first time, although on subsequent playthroughs I found like a more optimal way to do it where you don't use them at all. Because you can go through that crawl space by the
Yep.
where you get the scissors, right? And it can't follow you, so you don't need, and you can kite it around a table and stuff like this. But so I don't think it needed the lockers, and it makes me wonder if like they were playtesting the section and people just kept like dying over and over and over and over again, and they were like, "Fuck, we have to make this easier," because it feels out of place to me to some extent. Like it's giving you so many options to avoid the danger. Where I'm sort of like, did they really need that? Because it sort of spoils that you're in a section where stuff's gonna go that way.
Yeah, what they should do, and they won't, but they should patch it so that the baby moves much faster on the harder difficulty. I think that would make the entire situation so much scarier because then you can't court it around the tables. You have to hide, you can't.
Yeah,
Because like
yeah.
on my first playthrough, it didn't get me and I didn't use the lockers on my first playthrough. And so on my next playthroughs, I was like, I'm just going to use the same tactic. And I put the fuse in, I went to that room and I ran around the table, and then once it goes past, I went out the door, back over, opened the elevator, and I closed the elevator, and it was like right there, and I was like, that's gonna be how I'm gonna do it every time. And then there's that one section where it's officially locked you back, and you have to hide under the bed or in the locker. And I always hide under the bed because I don't think you can even get out if you hide in the locker. Can you?
You can, but you have to. I go under the bed as well, but it like the baby like walks up to the locker and then it like stands there for ages and then walks back and then it just keeps walking back. You have to just like walk behind it basically. Like if you go out of the locker, you just follow it from behind, like as it leaves the room, and then like you can't get past it, like you say, because when you go under the bed, you can go out the other side of the bed and just run, like after it goes all the way around.
Yep.
Yeah, so the lockers are weird, right? It's not the optimal way to do it, and you don't need them anywhere. So why are they there? But yeah, the area, it's great on the first time. It's not, you said it's totally different gameplay, and it is in the context of Resident Evil 8, but it reminds me of like that section with Lucas where you're in the birthday party escape room thing. It reminds, because you're in a room and you have a puzzle to solve, and then you don't have any weapons and you get out. So it wasn't as like, it didn't feel like revolutionary. It still felt like it was hitting the same notes, but it's got like a great build up of tension, and the scare is really good and really effective. But it's annoying to replay it. You almost feel like I almost wish you could just skip it. Like you could just go up to the house, and if it knows you're replaying, it just gives you the next key and the next baby part, like,
I agree with that.
automatically. Because it's not a hard section. You do the same thing every time,
Right.
and it's quite time consuming as well.
I agree with you on
but-
that, being able to skip that replay, but I still think like that section is it's so good. Like I don't think there's better audio design or creepier audio design in video games. That shit, every time, like I told you, it's not that like I was scared every single time, but I had just so much anxiety when I went into that house, and like it was every playthrough, and I played it 4 times. And every time I was in there, I was like, I don't want to get caught, and I don't want to be around this thing. Like my body was like, I don't want to be around this crying, broken baby doll / realistic doll, like realistic baby. And then like when you're behind it and you can see it's like real baby feet and like real baby hands, scary as fuck, dude. Scary as fuck. It's so terrifying. And
Yeah,
like,
the final part down there as well when you power up the elevator and it like basically they spawn the baby in like right next to you and
yeah.
like you're like, oh, is the door going to open in time or do I run into the other room or and both is fine, but on your first time you don't necessarily know if you're going to be able to get away. It's a great section.
It is, and let's move on past the basement section because that's just one part of the house. You got the upstairs after you're done, and that again is a totally different gameplay style than anything else in the game because it's a hunt. It's not like you have a gun and you're running around. It's like you're on a timer, and I didn't know this on my first playthrough. I didn't get attacked, but like if you don't find her in a certain amount of time, if you don't find Angie in a certain amount of time, then all of the little dolls start like attacking you. They like whip out scissors and they like do this weird
Yeah,
animation.
that's this section doesn't do anything for me really. I don't think it was very interesting. I think, it's like she can be spawned in several different
Yep.
locations.
After on
And I
multiple
think
playthroughs, like that's how
yeah,
you realize.
I think the screaming and the screeching is overly loud and it like fades to white as well, which sort of annoys me. Both of those things annoy me. And then yeah, I mean it's fine, but it's like the baby section is like the meat and potatoes, and then this is just like a short like 2 minute thing that you just do afterwards, and
Right.
it feels a bit like an afterthought to me. I don't know how they could have structured it better, but it's sort of
True.
like, oh, and then you just defeat her, and then it's done, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't mesmerize me in a way I would have hoped, but it's serviceable. It's totally fine, and as you
Well,
say, it's different.
I played the game with someone watching and they were like very afraid of dolls, so I had that different perspective of like someone who is very irritated and anxious about the dolls in the house. Like they were more scared of that part than they were of the basement baby. And I was like, this is so interesting because it's not like a normal boss fight. You go around, you grab it. It's more of a puzzle than it is a boss fight. And so you just solve the puzzle and then you move on. And I kind of liked the break from the rest of the game where you were doing boss fights. Like I was shooting way more. Like even in just the first village part, you shoot way more than you ever do in Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 is so much more like survival horror. You have less ammo, you have less things like that. And this one's like take out as much as you can and then the cutscene will trigger. And like I needed that break. So my first time it was definitely like, oh, this is cool. But after that, I'm definitely with you where this is why it's not my favorite part of the game is because I don't want to replay it. I don't want to go back there and do it again. I want to skip it. I want that option to be there, you know?
I like the baby section. I don't really like the doll section. It doesn't do anything. It's like I always feel it's quite a lot of times in horror games where it's like I know horror is and phobias are subjective, but it feels like there's some aspects of horror that are universally scary or somewhat universally scary. Like, if we take like real life, if someone comes at you with a knife or like a gun and is going to murder you, like that, if you're not scared of that, there's something wrong with you, right? Like everyone is scared of that. Whereas if you've got oh, it's like some flies or like some dolls or whatever, like there's not a universality to it, which is, I don't know. I mean, it I'm sure for the people it does scare, it amplifies it, right? Because it's almost like the game's like specifically after them, and that's quite cool. But in terms of like for most people, it's going to miss in terms of the scares and the spooks
Right.
associated with it.
And we're going to come back to this. I want to move on to Moreau and the fish in the swamp area. I really think that this one was very funny to me because there's not much story development that happens here. It's kind of sad if you read his lore and like how unwanted he is and like not the brightest of them all. And it's very, I feel like this section of the game is very canon to like real life because I don't think anyone's favorite part of the game is this part. And he's screaming like the whole time, like, love me, love me. And I'm like, I'm running through this. It's probably the part that I sped run or speed run the fastest. It's so quick, it's so easy, and I died the very first time on normal because I didn't understand what he was going to do with the acid rain, and like once you're in it, you can't get out, and I died.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like, oh shit, I got to figure out how to do this. And then after that, it was like he never felt like a threat ever again.
Yeah,
And
I mean, this section there's probably the least to say about it, right? Because it's just his character is pretty good. The gameplay, I mean, the stuff where you're running over the bridges and all that, I don't think that's particularly good, or it's fine. I think his boss fight is pretty good. I like the boss fight, except for that beginner's trap of the acid rain. But I like how it gives you tons and tons of ammo and mines and pipe bombs and all that, and everything you could ever want. And it's an all out sort of brawl. Yeah, I think it's an annoying section to replay. It's a good. It's a pretty good section the first time, but it's definitely. And I know other people have said this. It's like people seem to be like through the game so far. It's like it's going uphill, or at least like maintaining the quality level. This section is sort of where it dips. I feel like a little like I feel like no one's favorite section is this section. People like Castle Dimitrescu and Baby Benevito. All that stuff. So yeah, it's fine. The character's good, the boss fight's good, but it's slightly disappointing, I suppose, compared to what comes before.
okay, let's move on to the part which I actually love this part, the Heisenberg area. I loved his performance. I did get lost in the factory quite a bit. I think I was lost for like an hour. There was one door on the right that I totally missed, like in the room with the elevator, and I just kept running and running and running, and I was like, why can't I find the way out?
The doors are sort of like embedded in the wall and have
Yeah.
like a similar texture to them. I get what you mean.
But
The
I love how it's designed off like Frankenstein and just the way that Heisenberg is performing the whole time. It's like this way, the show must go on, and he just like has this weird like kind of a singing voice that he's doing just when he's talking. It's so weird, and I'm like into it. I was like, I'm just
yeah,
captured by him.
Heisenberg as a character, I feel similarly to him about how I feel about Ethan, because they're pretty bad characters in the sense of like if you're going to take the story overly seriously, but they pull off that type of like Nicolas Cage like overacting, like Christopher Walken style, like chewing up the scenery and just being so exaggerated as a character. Arguably, same for the Duke. Yeah, I understand some people totally hate him, but I'm with you that I think his performance is great. I love him. I think he's brilliant. And I also you mentioned about the factory. A lot of people don't like the factory. I really like the factory. I think it's good. I think when you climb that ladder after you first like get dropped down into the scrap heap, and you climb the ladder and you see like into the distance, and there's like the smoke and the steam, and those like conveyor belts with like the like techno monsters
I
he's
think they're called
making. Um,
soldats.
yeah, that stuff is great. I really like it, and I like how it feels like you're climbing out of hell. In terms of it, like you're going up like floor by floor, layer by layer, and it's like this gauntlet that you're going through. So yeah, I like it thematically. I think the fights are quite good there. I don't think they intended you to get lost as much as you can get lost, so that's probably a weakness. I didn't find it too bad, but I understand anyone that did. I've totally had I've played like some of the Lego games and got lost and not had any idea what I'm doing. So it happens, right? Yeah. I really like the section.
They totally tricked me because I thought that Heisenberg was like the most normal of all of the enemies. Like he had the least amount of problems. And when you get to the lore dump at the end and it's like he's a suitable host and but he's not quite there. When he's talking to Ethan and he's like, I have a plan, let's do all of this. And then he's like, but we're gonna use Rose. I was like, oh, that's nice. That's a nice little twist. But this guy's normal. And then he like drops you down the chute, and like then you see the factory, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot more going on under the hood than I was fucking thinking. Like I thought he was totally just a normal one, and he got transferred into this monster, or transformed into this monster, and then is trying to seek revenge. But he is way beyond the point of help because he's got that Frankenstein like design to his character where he's building these soldiers, and I'm like reading the lore, and I'm like, he's saying, oh, this one failed, this one's stupid, this one doesn't think right. And
I
like,
mean, I agree and I disagree because I think he is definitely the most rational of anyone. Like he's clearly not lost control of his mind, and he identifies the threat that Ethan poses, and he's self-aware. In that sense, I think that I mean I really like that cutscene between him and Ethan that you mentioned, where you get like kicked down the hole because it's like the first time Ethan like isn't just like reacting and isn't scared. He's like proactive in terms of that he basically tells Heisenberg to fuck off. Like he stands up for himself and he's like I don't care because I've killed three others and I'm gonna keep going. Like you can't stop me. And I think that's a really cool like aspect of character development. I think it's weird because Ethan is makes no sense at like the start of the game. Like the way he reacts to stuff, he's totally clueless and also totally terrified when it's almost like they forgot like what he went through in Resident Evil 7, or like he forgot. So I don't think his character entirely works, but like it was really cool that he had that development by that scene, and I really like that scene. And yeah, I like his character. I like that he's got that depth to him where he's rational. He's not like the others, but also he's super fucked up and doing messed up things still.
yeah. And then let's go to the Heisenberg fight. I or we could talk about the enemies. He has a good number
No,
of enemy designs in that place. There's like a couple. See, that's what's so interesting about this game is like you said, they really stepped up the character designs and enemy types in this game. From the very beginning, you got lichens, and then you go in and you get these maidens and the flying enemies, and then you have no enemies in the Benevento part, and then you go to the fish part. I don't think there's just more lichens, and then you come to this part, and there's 4 or 5 more enemy types, and another boss fight, and I'm like, this is just phenomenal. Like this game is focused on its gameplay, and they didn't slack on the enemy types, and I thought that was super fun, especially when you're in the factory and it's dark. I felt a lot more tension. Like I would get scared because enemies would pop out, but it wasn't like I don't know. It wasn't like Resident Evil 7 where I was completely scared, like shitless, because I didn't know what the hell was going on or what was coming. It was just like I'm in a factory where he's creating these things, and there's like that wall. There's the wall of the Eins, which is like the drill man, and I'm like, when are they're gonna come off this wall? And so it's like that tension that is building throughout going through the level, and on the hardest difficulty, all of them are gone. It's such a unique thing where like on my first and second playthrough, there was all but one that came off the wall, or the other way around. There's one that came off the wall, and all the rest were staying there. And when I got to the final playthrough on the hardest difficulty, I was like, I saw the empty wall, and I was like, this is fucking cool. Like, this is awesome. I'm sitting here, like, I know they're wandering around the factory. Like, I know that. It's so fucking awesome. Resident Evil is so good with, like, changing enemy variety, and especially there was the part where you're being chased by the propeller. His name's like Sturm, the propeller man. He is chasing you, and then they spawn in like the maidens, and I'm like, holy, or not even the maidens. It's like undead people, something like that. And
Yeah, it's the ghoul enemies, like
yeah,
the ghoul guys.
and I'm like, this is so much crazier. Like I was much more scared when he was chasing me on the hardest difficulty than I was on my normal playthrough, because I was like, I'm just gonna get away. It's not gonna be hard. But it was more difficult when they were spawning the enemies. So I kind of wish that would have been that way on the
Yeah, I
first one.
had a I had a different experience to you. I think the changes are really cool on the hardest difficulty, but I think I never felt scared or tense or anything during the factory, because I guess I was sort of like, I think after the only scary section for me, I still don't think it was that bad for me, but I think it definitely was scary, was the baby fetus stuff. But the factory, I felt, for me, because like I mentioned about Ethan sort of being like, fuck you, I'll kill you all type of thing. I felt that was like the transition into being like more of an action game rather than like a horror game. And Resident Evil games always, well, often do this, where they like you get more and more powerful over the course of the game, and so it tends to sort of become less scary and more actiony. And for me, that section is like pure action in terms of gameplay. But I understand that the creatures are still, grotesque and threatening. So there is still some of that retained.
Right, but
But
it's
yeah, I'm happy to talk about the Heisenberg boss fight and the
yes. I want to talk about two
final
things.
section.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I play it on an OLED, so it's really dark in the factory, like really dark, and that made it like more intense because like I would just turn and there would be there would just be one of those fucking drill dudes just like swinging away, and that would scare me. It wasn't like the baby fear. It wasn't anything like that. It was just more like it's dark in here and I can't see, and I could get hit and be very low on health. So there was like that kind of scariness. It wasn't like I was. It's hard to explain how there's like different levels of fear. It's more like tense versus afraid. But
Yeah.
let's before we talk about the Heisenberg boss fight, let's talk about the Sturm propeller fight, which is like a maze, and then it like runs around and like knocks the walls down. I thought that was like a really cool like mini boss fight. It wasn't hard. I mean, it was hard on the hardest difficulty. I died a lot. But I also did this thing where like I tried to combine a couple of my playthrough runs where I didn't use health kits and I didn't craft any ammo and I tried to combine a couple different runs into my Shadow Village or my Village of Shadows run. And eventually I just gave up cuz I couldn't beat Miranda without using medkits. And I did a knife only speed run, so it was like it didn't matter that I did all that stuff, but I tried and it was fun. And I was struggling with that freaking drillman because he would come running through the walls, or not the drillman, the propeller fight, and he would come running through the walls, and then I would get burned and it would slow me down, and then he would run me over, and I was like, oh, I'm getting so angry. But I just used a med kit and then I got out really easily.
Yeah, the first time I fought him, I died a couple of times, but then I never died again to him in any playthrough because the way to do that fight consistently is to so like when he does like the run with the propeller, it's like it opens up more of the arena, right? Because he like breaks down the walls. But then his other attack, his like flame attack, is more effective for him when there's fewer walls. So like it's easier to dodge his run. Like it's hard to dodge his run when you're like walled in, but then it's easier to dodge his flame when there's more walls around. At least so the way to beat him consistently is to like break a few of the walls, but not all of them. And then when he does the flame thing, if you just like get a wall in between you and him, the path of the flame is like really really short and it has no way of hitting you, so you can basically like exploit the fight so that you always have plenty of walls to hide behind when he's going to do the flame thing, and he'll always just hit the flame into the wall right in front of him, and then you never have to worry about it. And then when he does the run, you can move to a more open area to dodge it. So that I found that really consistent.
There's also a strategy where you can knock down all the walls, and then when he gets up and charges the fire thing, and you just run sideways, then he can never hit you, and you can get behind him, and then instead of him running into the wall, you can shoot the weak point on the back, and it's not that hard to do. But if you don't have all the walls down, you might run into walls or something like that. And there's a lot of times where I'm
Yeah,
pretty good.
but I mean the problem with the problem with that is that the fire stays on the field through like
It's true.
multiple different runs is the thing. Like if you do it the other way, then he never has any fire like anywhere at that point that you could run into. But either way works. He's not like, yeah. I don't think either of us had like a bunch of trouble to him.
No.
He was like such a shock and so difficult like the first time, or more difficult the first time for sure.
Yeah, and when I first saw him, I didn't notice that his arms were chopped off. And then I read the document, and whenever I was looking at his character, I was like, because Heisenberg says he's so stupid, and he's like he chopped off his own arms, and I was like looking at him, and he's just like got two stumps, and he's just the propeller, and I'm like, it's so funny how they just write
Yeah,
this stuff into the
the
game.
propeller's so big that there's right, like it'd be so easy to cut your arms off, and they
Yeah.
they thought about that. Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, okay, let's go on to the Heisenberg fight, which I thought was a cool design, and it was another change of gameplay. That's like the theme that I was trying to tell you about. Is like from the very beginning, every boss fight is a different like style of gameplay or a different tactic, and I thought it was fun and interesting.
Yeah, I mean the Heisenberg fight is very yeah, it's like when the game goes off the rails in terms of like intentionally off the rails, of course. Like it references the boulder punching Chris Redfield. Like it's just so self-aware and it just doesn't care anymore. And a lot of people will hate that, but I think it's fine. The fight is interesting. It's okay. You know, it's another gimmick fight really in terms of how it works, but it's fun for what it is. And yeah, it sort of gets the best out of Heisenberg as well. Although I will say, I think like this is probably the start for me where the game becomes worse. I think from like now until the end of the game, basically, it's like the low point
We are
for me.
so opposite. This is where I'm like,
Right.
all right, what the fuck is going on? And now I have so many questions, and now I can't wait for DLC. And like, it all starts with Chris, you know, and that's what we're gonna talk about now, and then we might talk about more when we talk about the Miranda fight. But you know, you get this part with Chris where I knew we were gonna play as Chris, not because it was spoiled, but like after Ethan's heart gets ripped out, I'm like, he's dead. Holy shit, he's dead, and that's it. Like I'm going to play as Chris. There's no other option unless they just end the game here. And then you know you start up as Chris and you run through the village, and Chris is such a fucking badass that it just nothing phases him. And I actually found this part really hard on the hardest difficulty. I was going through the whole game with the Magnum, and I was one shot and everything, and now I'm like I was completely underpowered because the weapons, yes, they are strong, but they weren't as strong as the Magnum as I was playing. And so it was just a little bit of a learning curve, but it wasn't impossible. And I just liked the lore that with like Chris and his squad. This is like the first time you get to see them, and I'm hoping we kind of get another game with Chris. Like I really enjoy all of Chris's involvement, and you know, again, there's so much to discuss with Chris and what happens after the game. So I say we come back to this, but go ahead and say your piece on this section where you're Chris and you're just in the village marching your way to the Megamycete.
We don't have to like cover absolutely everything about Chris. I think that so yeah, for me the game falls apart a little here. I think the story is pretty weak. Like it's like they didn't nail the landing for me. I think some of the mystery aspects are cool, you know, with like what the BSAA are doing there and all that stuff, right? That's being teased for later games or DLC. I think that the problem with Chris is like he feels like he was sort of rammed into the game in a way that he didn't really fit in terms of it's a bit. I mean, I hope they have DLC to answer it because it's like Ethan is going around and killing the four lords, right? While Chris is who, you know, in terms of like Resident Evil power levels, right? You sort of imagine that Chris is like more powerful than Ethan, right? In terms of I mean, you know, obviously Ethan has, you know, the molded aspect of like invincibility and stuff. But you know, excusing that, right? People consider Chris to be boulder punching, has tons of guns and ammo and a squad, and he has all this intel and all that, right? And I think it's a bit disappointing that he's sort of, in terms of the actual game, in terms of like the gameplay, he's doing essentially nothing while Ethan's going around and like he's you know he's going after the Megamycete obviously, but and you know Miranda and all of that. But it feels like Ethan is doing like all of the work and Chris is just like fucking around basically. And Chris, of course, lets Ethan down ultimately with you know the end of the game in terms of Ethan dying. So I think for like story reasons, I really like Chris Redfield as a character. I think that I wish he was a little better used and his purpose was more reinforced in the gameplay and in what you're doing on the ultimate journey, right? Like if there was more reference to him essentially doing something else that's sort of fitting of what you'd expect a Chris Redfield to be doing. And I
Right.
think his section the gameplay of his section, I didn't like it much either. I mean, I think the action focus it could have worked, but I wish it wasn't just like a rehash of running through the village again. I get the intention of like you're going through the village one last time as it's like being destroyed, and that's like a cool idea. But I think the execution isn't there. I think that just running through the same place again, but there's like tons of enemies now. It's sort of a bit weak, especially because it's like this is the Chris Redfield section, right? Like this is the big boy. this is his whole thing, right? This is his moment to shine, and it's like, oh, I'm just going through the same area I did before. So I think that was disappointing for me. I don't think it's terrible or anything, but I think it's probably the weakest moment. His boss fight also being like a rehash of that, like the big guy with the hammer, right? It's
Small
again, it's
area, small area, dude. That was so tight quarters.
yeah, but I mean, it's there needed to be more new there to justify it, to make it feel like it wasn't something they just added in last minute in terms of like how do we get Chris into this game and how do we give him things to do is the problem I have with it, I suppose, both in terms of story and gameplay. And then I guess like we're talking right at the end of the game here, so I'll just say like the final boss fight with Miranda. I think that's fine as well. I think that's pretty good. It's like a good like tough fight. I like that it's like ended with Ethan. It's like the end of Ethan's story. I think that's a good choice that they made. It gives him importance to the narrative again. I think again another Chris criticism that I have that hopefully they solve with DLC is that Chris is there at the final boss fight with you with Miranda in terms of that he shoots her once in like a cutscene and then he doesn't do anything for the whole time you're fighting Miranda and I guess she's done like that thing where she's like closed off the arena, and that's presumably the excuse that Chris can't be involved anymore. But it still feels pretty weak to me. It's like what, like he's shot her once, and then he's like, "See you later, Ethan. You just deal with it." So yeah, so it doesn't work for me as well as it does for other people, and that's fine. Um,
Right.
I still like the section, especially the final boss fight, but yeah, so that's it's a weaker.
I have a lot of counterpoints to what's going on with Chris, and obviously these are all based on me and a little bit of the story and like how you want to look at it, and like your perspective is something I totally understand, but there's a lot in the game that I also think justifies kind of everything that's going on with Chris, because there's several we talked about like exploring the village, and like there's a part in the story where I'm pretty sure it's at Moreau's part, but you see Chris in the cave and he's got all this equipment and he's like under the radar. The reason we don't see Chris is because Miranda is this special kind of being that can transform. Like people think that she's the hag. Like she was able to turn into Mia and infiltrate the house. So Chris doesn't want his presence to be known in the village. So that's why we don't see him. And if you're like exploring the village, there's like this dark cave that you can go inside of, and there's like a bunch of like equipment in the corner, and it's like all of Chris's stuff. So it's like he's there, but he's just not being seen. And like you end up at the Heisenberg fight, you see him building that machine to like face him, because he's like, I can't use metal guns and stuff because that won't work on this fight on this creature. So he's kind of letting Ethan do most of the work, and he's just going around getting the intel about the Megamycete and all that stuff. And I think that's the only reason like we don't see him. And I have no way to explain your logic at the end where Chris shoots her one time and then she closes it off and he doesn't do anything else. I don't know why he wouldn't. Or like he has the like marker thing to explode the house. It's like it would have been cool if like that was awesome. Like he's like attacking the outside of the shell. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, let me just respond. I think so. I think the problem is that it's Chris Redfield, right? If it was like Bill Dingo or something, if it was just like some random guy, then I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. But like, it's like Chris Redfield is like a protagonist of Resident Evil games. It's like, what is he doing? I get that he's trying to stay under the radar, but like,
yeah, and his squad too. His squad is is an infiltration squad. It's something where they're all stealth units.
Yeah, but no. But think about it in terms of like the time frame, right? Like in the time frame where Chris does nothing or like builds that machine for Heisenberg, which I accept, right? In the time frame of that, Ethan is going around and killing all of the four lords, right? He's going and like obliterating them, and then he's going to Miranda or whatever, and he needs Chris's help with her, of course, right?
Yeah, and remember, that's all in the course of a day.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, what is Chris like? He's not doing enough to justify, based on what we know of like Chris Redfield and his reputation from the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 5. Like he should be out there killing like another four lords, right? Like he should be doing like something of equal magnitude or greater. And I understand Miranda is like she's, a bigger threat than all of the lords, right? Like she's like a bigger deal. But like he doesn't deliver there really either, like to an extent that outweighs Ethan's contribution. So I think
Right.
it's just something where it's like it's the fact that he's Chris Redfield is the problem in the sense of that he's not given enough agency. Like I thought, and I think DLC can solve a lot of that because with Resident Evil 7 they had the not a hero thing where it's like Chris comes in and he kills tons and tons of molded and then he gets after Lucas and he closes the book on that, and
Right.
he solves yeah, so that's great, and hopefully they do something like that with Resident Evil 8 where it's like you see his side of it and it's like, oh shit, there's actually like these huge monsters that Ethan never even heard of and you never even heard of in the story, and that's what Chris is dealing with while also trying to stay under the radar like you
Right.
said.
But then they would have
I,
to retcon some stuff because there's points in the story where like one of the squad members is like, you should have told Ethan. And it's like, what should he have told Ethan? He should have told Ethan that they were planning something and that Ethan was forcing their hand. Like that's the reason he was hiding, is like he wasn't just gonna go in guns blazing, which is totally a Chris thing to do. But in this
so
game,
no,
they're
no,
totally turning Chris on his head and they're making him like a secret ops agent, which is why like he trained Ethan, he comes in and he kills Mia, and it's just like they planned that attack on Ethan's house. They planned everything. And
yeah, but it doesn't work because then Chris sucks. Is like the problem then. Like he sucks at his job ultimate because the thing they're saying not that you should have told Ethan was about Mia still being alive, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying you should have told Ethan that Mia's still alive and all this and that and we planned the attack like you said, right? And he regrets that. And I think that is a good moment for him.
did he
But,
know
but the
she
problem
was alive? I don't think he did. I don't think
well
he finds Mia
okay,
in the
okay. I
cell
mean,
in the basement and is like, Mia, and then he's like, is this
okay,
is this Miranda or not? Like,
let me rephrase that then. What they're saying he should have told Ethan is that Miranda was Mia
oh
during
yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
during the opening of the game. That's what they're referring to. That's what I mean. That they're referring to that, right? Because you don't know as Ethan and as the player, you don't know till the end. But obviously Chris knew since the beginning of the game, right? Because he's the guy that orchestrates that attack. So it's like he comes off as like he comes off as weaker and like a step behind. And I get what you mean that they've got these plans and that Ethan's sped it up. I mean, also it's arguably Chris's fault that Ethan's in the situation in the first place,
Yeah.
right? Because
I
they get basically tricked into taking them in the bands, and then they get knocked off course, and that starts off the whole adventure, right? So they get outplayed at the start. Ultimately, is the thing. So I think that's just where the disappointment is for me. It's like hopefully they expand and build upon it because there is a good foundation, but it feels like Chris has been knocked down a peg, I think, since some of other and he's been rebooted, I suppose, partially as
I
well.
think so
So
too. That's what, like, he's not the boulder punching guy like that he was. I feel like they're ramping up. Resident Evil has become, like, with this horror franchise 7 and 8, they have become kind of like slower survival, and I don't think they want to. If they want to make a Chris game, it's going to be another action-packed game, kind of like Resident Evil 8. And what they might do is they might slow it down and turn it into like a stealth game, which I wouldn't be mad at. But this is what Chris seems like now. He doesn't seem like this boulder punching guy anymore. Like even in the village part, he mows through everything. He gets to his objective and he's done.
yeah, but that's the problem, right? Is they're trying to have it both ways because they're saying he's stealthy and he's doing this secret mission, but then when you play as him, you've got like 500 grenades and assault rifles and SMGs, and you're just mowing stuff down. And I get like, oh, like they prepared for the mission that they've got, right? But it's like in terms of the actual the gameplay is so action packed, and the Ethan stuff is more weaker. So it feels like they kind of want it. They want it both ways in that sense. To me, it just it doesn't fit as well as I think it could. And I think I don't remember where I read it. I think it was from I think that Dusk Golem guy. I don't know if you've heard of him. But he seems to sometimes have like inside stories on Capcom and Resident Evil and horror stuff. I think according to him, Resident Evil 8 wasn't going to be a mainline Resident Evil game at first. It was going to be like some spin-off, either in like the conceptual phase or whatever. And then afterwards they were like, "Oh, what we've got here is really really good. Let's turn it into a mainline game and like make it great." And that might be where Chris got involved, and it became directly about Ethan and all that stuff. I don't know, but it feels a little, it feels slightly mismatched. I mean, also obviously this game, a lot of the final parts of development of it were during COVID as well. Of
True.
course. So if
True.
it feels a bit rushed and a bit disconnected, it can be could be due to that as well. I don't know, but for me, it didn't. I've said I like Resident Evil 8 more than Resident Evil 7, and I love Resident Evil 7. I like it more than Resident Evil 1 remake as well. So I don't want it to sound like I'm hating on the game or anything,
Oh,
or like they
absolutely
fucked it
not.
up.
It's just
But
it's
for me,
fun.
it
We
didn't
got to
work
have a
as well as it
conversation where we disagreed about plot points, and like that is totally fine. It's just like, where does the series go from here? And for you and I, we might have different ideas of what that is, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic about the future of the series. I mean,
Me
I've
too.
said it right. I said it with Resident Evil 2, with Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 3 to a lesser extent. Like the final section of these games, they do drop the ball sometimes for me, and it's just a thing that seems to happen. The opening areas seem generally extremely strong, and then along the way it loses it a little, but not to an extent where the games are anything less than great.
Right. All right, let's just finish it off with the completionist kind of view.
Yeah, we talked already about like the mercenary stuff at the
Right.
start of this, but we
How many
also
playthroughs did you do?
I don't remember. I definitely combined a lot of them. I think I did 3 playthroughs or 4 playthroughs. So I combined the knife only run with I did it on the easiest difficulty, and I did it with the like no healing run as well, and the no item box run and the no selling stuff run. I think I did all of those in the same playthrough.
Yeah, that's the
And then
strategy.
and then I think I did the final playthrough of like the Village of Shadows difficulty. I did it with the Magnum, the fully upgraded Magnum with infinite ammo, and I don't think I did like what you said. I don't think I did anything else with that. I think I just got everything else out of the way first, and then did that pretty much on its own.
Yeah, I did that third. So my first playthrough was on normal, no guide, and then I looked up a guide, and I had 5 files left and 6 goats, and then I used a guide by Gage, which is this guy that is in a platinum Discord that I'm in a part of. But I used his guide, and it was so good. And then obviously I talked about using your guide with Maka, but my first
Yep.
playthrough normal, no guide. Second playthrough casual, getting more money for the Magnum upgrade because my Magnum, I upgraded the wrong Magnum, and then I had to do a third playthrough, and I did that on Madness, or not Madness. That's what Resident Evil 7 was called, Village of Shadows, and
Yep.
I tried to combine a couple just for fun, and then it didn't work out, so I just beat it, and then I ran through and I did my final playthrough, the fourth, with on casual with the knife only speed run, all of the combined. That's like the strategy. That
Yep.
if that was it, the platinum wouldn't be that hard. It's definitely the mercenary stuff that makes it hard.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think as well the we already covered mercenaries. Yeah, I think as well and I've talked about this with some people, but the achievements to like beat the game knife only and without healing items and well with only 3 healing items or whatever it is and all that stuff. I think they look way harder on paper than they are in execution.
Yeah.
Like some people are like, "Oh, I'd never be able to do that," but I'm like, yeah, you would be able to. Like, they're really. If you play on casual, you can take so many hits. It's like and if you know like exactly where you're going, there's only like very specific sections of the game that can even threaten you, really, in terms of once and it's not even like really that much of a skill thing. It's just like once you know where the enemies are and where the progression of the game,
Right.
you'll be totally fine for the
And
most
you
part. It's
regenerate
just
so much health on casual. So much.
yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
not only that, but like I beat it in 220. You have so much breathing room for under 3 hours. So much. And
Yeah,
we talked about last week how I thought the game was too long. I kind of think that still, but I sped run it so fast that it's one of those games you just once you master it and you know what you're doing, it's not that hard to do.
yeah, you
And
you cut off way more time than you'd think for
yeah,
sure,
for
definitely.
sure. All right. AJ, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we did a good job. I think we covered everything, in terms of the game and our thoughts and opinions on it and the completion difficulty. So yeah, I think we've covered everything pretty much.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Peace out.
See ya.